This is day 239 of Ukraine's resistance. We are at Mediacentru Ukraine. My name is Vasil Samokhvalov. We are starting our next briefing. With us today is Fedir Venislavskyi, who is the People's Deputy of Ukraine and a representative of the President at the Parliament, as well as the member of the Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence. Hello, sir. Hello. Can we start by the resolutions passed by the Verkhovna Rada, the Supreme Council of the Parliament? There was a resolution on test of, I think, constitutional basics, history, and language for those foreign nationals who want to gain Ukrainian citizenship. So far, there's been a first reading and discussion, but can you tell us about the logic of this bill, how it will be implemented in practice, in your opinion? Well, I think it's a very important question, in my opinion, especially against the backdrop of the aggressive war right now being waged by the Russian Federation against Ukraine. There's a higher number of former citizens of Russia who want to gain Ukrainian citizenship, who want to gain a Ukrainian passport in order to travel over Europe, considering the non-visa regime with Russia, and or the non-visa Ukraine's non-visa regime with EU and the lack of non-visa regime with Russia. But for us to meet all of the provisions of the citizenship law, we decided, or we suggested the changes that the Parliament has preliminarily voted yesterday. The idea is that in the current law on citizenship that was passed in '91, one of the preconditions for gaining Ukrainian citizenship was knowing Ukrainian language to an extent sufficient for understanding or communication, and secondly is the upholding of the laws, keeping to the laws and the constitution of Ukraine. So the changes that were voted yesterday, on the one hand, they specify that in order to meet the demands to know the Ukrainian language to a sufficient extent, somebody has to formally notify, formally attest to this level of Ukrainian skills. I think that any former citizens of other countries who want Ukrainian citizenship have to have some basic Ukrainian in order to integrate in Ukrainian society, and so this demand is definitely timely, and it is sort of following the trends of the current legal requirements for citizenship in other European countries, because almost all European countries require some level of language skills prior to granting citizenship. In this case, we only specify that it will be necessary to attest the level of Ukrainian skills. The second question, the second aspect, the recognition and keeping of the Constitution of Ukraine, which sets down the main principles and values of Ukrainian people and the continuity, the historical continuity of Ukrainian statehood. The recognition of the Constitution requires an understanding of the historical stages of the existence of the Ukrainian state. And I'm sure that we are at a final stage of the struggle for Ukrainian statehood. After this war, after our victory, no doubt will ever arise again that the Ukrainian state exists. We are now currently fighting back the attempts by Russia to deny our right to statehood. Therefore, these demands in the law are there to increase the level of knowledge by non-citizens or people without citizenship, in order to integrate them most fully into our historical and cultural community, which they aim to join. Putting such tests, who will hold these tests? The migration services, some security service, some external independent commission, some other body? How will it work, do you think? Well, I think this will be written down in additional acts passed by the Cabinet of Ministers and resolutions by the Cabinet of Ministers, much as it is now, or perhaps a presidential decree that will determine the specific order, the specific procedure. Currently, we have the a presidential decree I think that determining the level of Ukrainian skills to as set forth by set forth in the law has to be determined by either independent assessing bodies like what we currently have, the current external testing, independent external testing that basically has the entire test system to test the level of Ukrainian skills for any citizen of Ukraine or citizens of foreign citizens or somebody trying to gain Ukrainian citizenship. I think this will be the most appropriate and least prone to a mechanism that will be least prone to corruption, because I think everything else includes corruption risks, which we have to leave in the past. Next question has to do with Iran and Iran's weapons supply to Russia. This problem is now at the level of the UN. It is now being felt in the Middle East. Could you tell us how will Ukraine proceed, and both legally and the response of our parliament? Well, the Parliament passed a resolution yesterday turning to the state governing bodies and international organizations where they condemned Iran's supplying the types of weapons that are being used by the Russian Federation to wage its terrorist war against Ukraine. These kamikaze drones, these kamikaze UAVs made by Iran, 99 cases out of 100. The targets they've been hitting are infrastructure objects, residential buildings, etc. So we understand very clearly that the Iranian weapons are being used by the terrorist state to continue waging its terrorist war and sow fear among the citizens of Ukraine, to attack objects prohibited by all norms of waging war, objects of critical infrastructure that have no military significance. So the parliament has responded, and the ministry, the foreign ministry, and the Ukrainian government in general will respond appropriately. Today we, as far as I know, the ambassador of Iran is being expected, and for a conversation. How will we proceed? I'm sure that the UN, whose resolution has limited the import and export of particular technologies to Iran and from Iran, have to test who and to what extent violated this resolution of the General Assembly of the UN, who has supplied parts for Iran used in these UAVs that are largely a type of weapon which harms the civilian population. And I think that the subjects who have taken the liberty to ignore sanctions and trade with Iran and supply it with particular parts or weapons, other components for the weapons that are being used against Ukraine right now, have to face financial, economic, political sanctions from the UN. However, we all understand that the main violator of the UN General Assembly resolution is the Russian Federation, who has not only been buying but also using these weapons, trying to get around sanctions. I'm sure that we will continue to consolidate the efforts of all our Western partners in order to continue sanction pressure, because even in spite of their assurances that they have adapted, this pressure is very painful for Russia, and strengthening it will, of course, bring forth even harder consequences for the Russian Federation in the future. I'm sure that this is the path that we'll be taking with our Western partners in response to the Iranian threat and the use of these drones. A third block of questions. Yesterday, Russian President Putin has passed a number of very strange decrees that have to do with the state of war, martial law in the occupied territories of Ukraine. But among other things, there's a point on the evacuation of population from temporarily occupied territories. We're talking about the Kherson region. Outwardly, this looks like forced deportation, forced resettlement, like this happened with the Crimean Tatars, like it happened with the Chechens, like it happened with the Operation Vistula or Viswa. how will Ukraine respond to this legally? Okay, firstly, I would like to express my point of view on the decrees that were passed by Putin yesterday. The first decree was about the martial law, declaring martial law in the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine. In my opinion, this attests to the fact that Putin is trying to, on the one hand, mobilize all of the economic and financial and human and industrial resources in the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine to strengthen, to boost its defense capacity, so that all of the companies perform the assignments set to them by the military administrations of the occupying country in order to resist Ukraine's attempts, or let's say consolidate in the face of Ukraine's attempt to liberate our territories. This, I think, also another consequence of this is, I'm sure, is to mobilize Ukrainian citizens into illegal armed formations of the Russian Federation active in Ukraine, which is, of course, in dire violation of norms of international laws and its demands of treating civilians during the war. This is what the Russian Federation is doing right now. This is another brutal violation of the norms of international humanitarian law, for which Russia will bear legal responsibility in international institutions we're currently forming with our partners. Ukraine will respond, I'm sure, through additional appeals to the UN General Assembly, initiating the treatment of these questions and actions that will accompany these steps. I would also like to add that the second decree that followed the first decree about the martial law in the Kherson, Zaporizhia regions and Luhansk and Donetsk regions of Ukraine, which are temporarily occupied, was dedicated to introducing special legal regimes in all of the border areas of the Russian Federation, which is Rostov, Belgorod, Rostov, Bryansk regions of the Russian Federation, also the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. So this is a medium level threat according to their legal regulations, and essentially all of the regions of the southern and central Russian Federation has also introduced special legal regimes, which presupposes mobilization of resources, particular rules about movement, in order to perform the tasks about the wartime tasks in Ukraine that they are currently incapable of performing. So I'm sure that these actions by the Russian Federation and the President of Russia, of this criminal regime, intend to prepare both the public opinion and grounds for announcing martial law, not only in temporary occupied territories, but at least in the regions bordering Ukraine. And my subjective forecast, this is my personal point of view, is that in the nearest few months, perhaps even sooner, we will see the Russian Federation announcing martial law, declaring martial law in order to consolidate its efforts in its territories, or perhaps to hide their defeat. Sounds about right. Thank you. With us was Fedir Venislavskyi, People's Deputy of Ukraine, representative of the President in Ukraine's Parliament. Our next briefing will take place at 1 o'clock. We will be talking to representatives of the regional military administration and the representatives of the energy sector, who will be fielding questions on how the Lviv region is assuring energy supplies after missile attacks.